able to continue that aspect of our Lenten programs. You will note that from our flyers that donations can be made to Brigid's House of Hope and to Church World Service by going to their websites, or you may send donations to the Greater Concord Interfaith Council, and we will forward them to your choice, the program of your choice. Lent is a Christian tradition. In the early church, it was a time to prepare for baptism and acceptance into membership. Today, it is observed in a lot of different ways, but most significantly, it is a journey from darkness to the light of Easter and the resurrection. And we hope that the sparks of light that we'll be hearing about from our speakers will help light our way on our Lenten journey. I have a brief reading which seems appropriate for our series. This is from writer Anne Wing's book of devotions, Journey to Jerusalem, and it's entitled The Disciples. Hurting, they came to him. Healed, they followed him. Grateful, they gave to him what they had and what they were. Blessed, they became a blessing and went out into the world in his name. Those who are hurt and healed and grateful and blessed still move among us in his name. Would you please join me in a moment of prayer? Gracious God, you know that we often become weary and even disillusioned by the darkness that seems to pervade so many places in our world. Homeless individuals with no place to lay their heads. Immigrants fleeing the terrors of war, aggression by power-hungry despots, a pandemic that has threatened our lives in so many ways, and personal and health issues that seem to blindside us. So we pray this day for strength and courage that we might move ahead with hope for the dawning of a new day where light breaks through all the dark places with healing, justice, and peace for all. Amen. I'm delighted and honored to welcome Hannah Essa today to be with us. She's from Brigid's House of Hope, a shelter for victims of human trafficking. The House of Hope was founded by Bethany Cottrell, and she has had a passion for work with vulnerable populations. Beginning in 2005, she was involved with the Child Advocacy Center movement and later employed by the Merrimack County Advocacy Center and Merrimack County Human Services. And in 2018, Bethany founded Brigid's House of Hope. She served for more than 10 years in the Human Trafficking Coalition Task Force and has been involved in numerous community initiatives intended to support vulnerable populations and strengthen services and programs. Today we have with us Hannah Essa, and Hannah is the program manager for Brigid's House of Hope. She joined the organization early in 2021 and has focused on expanding the program's sustainability. Her role involves fundraising, grant writing, program development, and raising public awareness about the issue of human trafficking in New Hampshire. So it is a pleasure and honor to welcome Hannah today. Hannah Essa.
Thank you so much, Eleanor, for the introduction. And thank you to all of you for inviting me and for having me today. Unfortunately, as I mentioned, Bethany Cottrell, the director, can't make it today, but I'll be sharing a little bit about the issue of human trafficking in New Hampshire, as well as the history of the organization and what we're hoping to do here in New Hampshire. So I'll just share my screen now. I just have a presentation. Okay. And can everyone see this? Once I think it's loading right now.
Yes, we can see it.
Yes.
Okay, great. So as Eleanor mentioned, I'm the program manager here at Brigid's House of Hope, and Bethany Cottrell is the executive director. So just wanting to give some background on the issue of human trafficking for anyone who may not know what it is. So there we go. Sorry about that. So the definition of human trafficking is that it's a crime that involves the exploitation of a person for labor, services, or commercial sex through force, fraud, or coercion. So it's a very big definition. It's hard to define, but it's also very difficult for individuals who are being trafficked to understand and define it for themselves, that they are in fact a victim of this. So some common types of human trafficking, just some examples, are forced labor, sexual exploitation, or debt bondage, but there's many other types as well. So in these types of presentations, we always like to give some myths versus facts around human trafficking, just because there is so much misinformation out there about what it is. So some common myths are that it only affects adult women, that there's always violence involved, that it requires some type of transportation across borders or state or country lines, and that it doesn't happen in small communities like New Hampshire. So for the facts, human trafficking, in reality, it happens to anyone, regardless of their age, gender, race, or any other identifying demographic. And violence, such as kidnapping or physical force, is not always involved. A lot of times in the media or in like Hollywood movies, they'll show human trafficking as it relates specifically to physical types of force, but oftentimes traffickers will use psychological tactics to keep their victims in the exploitive situation. It's different from human smuggling. So there's not actually any transportation required across borders for a human trafficking case. And finally, it occurs both on a global and local scale, even here in New Hampshire, unfortunately. So it's hard to define and get exact scope of how many victims there actually are, especially around the world, just because so much of the crime happens underground. And they're good at hiding it. But it's estimated that in 2016, there were about 40 million victims around the world. And it's assumed that there would be even more now in 2022. So from those statistics, it's estimated that about 1 in 4 or 25% are children, and about 70% women and girls, 30% men and boys. So as you can see, it really doesn't discriminate age, gender, really any demographic identifier. So here on a local scale, victims of human trafficking are regularly identified across all 10 counties of the state. And there's a human trafficking collaborative task force here in New Hampshire, which consists of a lot of different stakeholders across the state. And they receive between 50 to 90 human trafficking referrals on an annual basis. Between 2019 and 2020, the investigations increased by 53%. So it shows that not only is it here, but it is also a growing issue. So to lead into some of the gaps in service, here in New Hampshire, the long-term safe housing has been identified as the largest gap for these victims. So currently, New Hampshire doesn't have any specialized safe housing designated for this population, and oftentimes they'll be placed in a hotel or a short-term emergency shelter, such as a homeless shelter, but oftentimes those aren't best suited for this population just because they have complex trauma histories and other things co-occurring oftentimes that they aren't always able to get the services they need in order to recover and heal. So there's really a great need here in New Hampshire for that restorative safe housing. Without a safe place to go once they're identified, it's estimated that about 80% of survivors end up back in the exploitive situation. So it shows the importance and significance of that safe housing piece as survivors recover and heal from their trauma. So leading into Brigid's house is where we come in and how we're hoping to help the issue here in New Hampshire. So the mission of Brigid's house is to provide safe housing for victims of human trafficking and exploitation, which encourages hope, healing, empowerment, security, and long-term aftercare and support. So not only will we be providing safe housing and access to necessities such as food and other things like that, we're also going to be expanding access to medical care, mental health services, substance use services, and other things like that. Oh, sorry about that. So just to give some background on our history of the organization. So as Eleanor mentioned, I recently joined a little over a year ago, but Bethany's been working on this for the past few years. So back in 2016, New Hampshire received federal funding to support anti-trafficking efforts and create a formal task force on human trafficking. So across the country, it's pretty common for each state to have one or two task forces on this, and New Hampshire formed theirs in 2016. So through the task force, they conducted some research and determined that safe housing was the largest gap in service for these survivors. And that's when the plans began to formalize to open Brigid's house. And 2018, the board was formed, Brigid's house formalized, and the following year officially became a nonprofit. So it's been about 3 years now. And in 2020, a rental property was secured and renovations began. COVID slowed down things in that regard a little bit, but thankfully all the renovations are now complete at the safe house, and we're hoping to open our doors in the upcoming months to officially begin accepting referrals for survivors of human trafficking for our residential program. So leading into now, where we are, March of 2022. So over the last few years, we've worked on our Founders Campaign, which is a capital fundraising campaign to raise $75,000. And we are only $2,000 away now from reaching our goal, which we're really excited about. We've also been completing house furnishings to furnish all the rooms and kitchens and things like that at the safe house. And we recently received grant funding to install our security system as well, to provide cameras and other security measures for the safe house. And we've been collaborating with community partners and agencies to form linkage agreements and partnerships in the area of the safe house to provide on-site and off-site services for medical care, dental care, mental health services, substance use services, and other things like that to really ensure that survivors have all they need in order to recover and heal from their trauma and from their exploitive situation. So another thing that we are doing is creating partnerships with faith groups across the state, and also doing outreach presentations like this one. So that's really important to us in our mission because it really helps expand that community awareness around the issue of human trafficking, and also really just emphasizes the importance of safe housing here in New Hampshire. So we're hoping to open in spring of this year, which is really exciting. We're really close to our goal and getting everything all set and ready to open and begin accepting referrals for our residential program. So this is just a snapshot of our Founders Campaign fundraiser. So our goal was to raise $75,000, which is matched dollar for dollar by the property owner at the safe house, which covers building costs for 1 year, which is $150,000. So we're about $2,000 away now, which is really exciting. And just wanted to share some photos of the safe house. So this is a picture of one of the bedrooms. So there's 8 bedrooms at the safe house, and 2 will be reserved for house monitors to provide overnight staffing at the safe house. But we'll have the capacity to house up to 6 individuals in the residential program at a time. And this is a picture of a couple months ago, a local faith group furnished one of the bedrooms at the safe house, and they did a great job. And it just made everything more real, just because we've been going there for the past couple of years and seeing, all the renovations happening, and just to see everything come together has been really rewarding. So this is a picture of one of the bedrooms. And then there's a picture of the kitchen, one of the kitchens at the safe house. So the way it's set up is that it's a 4 2-bedroom apartment complex, and the apartments open up to each other or can be closed off to one another. So it's great for that communal living piece and that supportive shared living environment, while also giving the individual residents their own privacy to have their own bedroom and share a kitchen with one other individual as well. So the program is targeted for women over the age of 18 in New Hampshire. Anyone who has been exploited or who is at risk of exploitation through human trafficking will be eligible for the program here in New Hampshire. And so that's what the Safe House looks like. It's located in Rockingham County in a confidential location, but we'll be accepting referrals from all across the state because it is truly a statewide issue happening in every single county, unfortunately. So that was kind of just a brief snapshot of the issue of human trafficking, how it relates on a global scale, and also here in New Hampshire, why safe housing is such an important need, and also where we're coming in, what we're hoping to do, and just giving some information about the organization and our history. So I know that was a lot of information at once, so I'm happy to answer any questions that you may have. Our contact information is here, as well as our website and social media links as well. So I'm happy to answer any questions that anyone has.
Maybe if we can see you again. Yeah, somehow. So.
Perfect. Thank you.
So I know, I don't remember whether it was you or Bethany who spoke at the Interfaith Council meeting a while ago, but I know you gave some examples of some of the situations that people are in so that people don't have the TV version. If you could talk a little bit about that. I mean, we're used to seeing, when we see on TV, there are almost always people being brought, like I said, crossing across state lines. It's much more overt kind of physical violence. If you can talk about some of the other situations that you described before.
Yeah, absolutely. Oh.
And Hannah, no, just as you jump in to answer Krista's questions, do you want to look in the chat, or do you want me to read these questions after? Either way is comfortable for me.
Either way is fine. Yeah, I don't mind reading them and going from there if that works for you.
So we leave that to you then. Thank you.
Okay, sounds good. Yeah, so trafficking situations can vary depending on the individual situation. Sometimes they do involve that physical force, such as kidnapping, but oftentimes here in New Hampshire, that's not what we're seeing. We're seeing more of that psychological use as well as a tactic to keep individuals in their trafficking situation. So for example, a lot of times traffickers will target individuals who have other risk factors or who are vulnerable already, such as they're homeless or they have maybe mental health concerns, something like that. And they will kind of target them and use force, fraud, or coercion to leave them in that exploitive situation. So oftentimes it appears as forced prostitution and debt bondage, things like that, if that makes sense, if that answers your question. Okay, is there a program for those beyond the 6 residents, including males and females of all ages? So that's a good question. So as of now, we are targeting women over the age of 18, just because that is the major demographic we're seeing here in New Hampshire. But as I mentioned, really it doesn't discriminate, and you know, males can be victims as well, and individuals under the age of 18. So individuals who may not fit the demographic we're targeting for our program, we're not going to send them away or anything like that. We really want to be able to support everyone that we can. So in the event that we have a referral for the program who doesn't fit our eligibility criteria, we would work with them to place them appropriately in another safe house in New England. There are a few others in Massachusetts and Maine, or also we're hoping to be able to provide case management services and other wraparound care for individuals even if they don't live in the residential program, or anyone who doesn't maybe need housing, but they were a victim of exploitation and they still need some services, we can offer those as well, even if they aren't living in the program. Okay, how are victims rescued? So we haven't begun accepting referrals for the program yet. So this may look different once we're open, but typically we're assuming that we'll be getting referrals coming mostly from the Human Trafficking Task Force. They do a lot of that work in terms of, I guess, rescuing or identifying victims of trafficking across the state. And then from there, they'll make a phone call to us or another organization to work to place them appropriately in a program. And then from there, we will screen them and we'll work with them to interview them and determine if Brigid's house is a good fit for them. And then from there, if they're accepted into the program, they'll be able to move in. And the program, I don't know if I mentioned this, but it'll be a 12 to 18 month program, multi-phases. The first phase focusing on basic needs. And then as they progress through the program, the final phase being a transition into independent living. So that's what that referral process will look like. Someone asked, what if a victim isn't alone, like a mom with children and siblings? Yeah, so that for our program, we don't accept children or women with dependents. So if a woman has children, but they're not currently living with her, we would accept her into the program. And then if a goal of hers is to work towards that reunification, we would work with her on those efforts with the case management process. But unfortunately, we won't be able to house children directly on the safe house property. But as I mentioned before, we'll work to place them appropriately in another safe house as needed as those referrals come in. How will the referral system work? Individual cases are different, but how will you determine the length of stay? Yeah, so kind of what I explained before, so 12 to 18 month program model for that length of stay, but we're really going to be working with each individual in the program to as they recover and heal, everyone's journey will look different. So we really want to support them best and provide the housing and services for as long as they need and as long as they require that. Just because too, we know New Hampshire, it's very challenging to find that housing, especially for someone coming out of a situation like that. So we really want to make sure that they're best supported with all the tools and resources they need before going out into the community on their own. So really making the program very whole person centered, very individualized to each person. So the length of time for each individual may vary depending on the program. And as we open and start to see how long generally residents stay in the program, it may change. But as of now, we're assuming about 12 to 18 months. We do receive government funding. So we just received a federal grant from the Office of Victims of Crime. They had a grant application for safe housing to give grants to safe houses across the country that are providing housing to survivors of trafficking, specifically that population. So we applied and we received a 3-year grant, which is amazing. We're really excited about that. So that will really help us with sustainability because up until now, we haven't had any big federal grant funding. So this will be a 3-year grant to support personnel costs and overhead costs, which is great. And then are there any other questions? Jill, I know I saw, I don't know if you put it in the chat, but I saw the hand reaction, I think.
Yeah, I put it in the chat.
Okay, great.
All right, well, thank you. That was it was interesting and informative, and I do have your slides, so if there is anyone who wants copies of that, I can forward them if people ask for that.
Chris, there was just one question that popped in just as you started talking.
Okay.
If there's time. Chris gave me the job of having her back, and that's why I'm doing
yes,
this.
great. Yeah, and I just clicked that off. So Hannah, yeah, or I mean,
or Margaret, please.
Oh, Yeah, I just, after victims of human trafficking transition to independent living, do they still need to worry about threats, from, the perpetrators, from those who trafficked them in the first place, or what kinds of supports
Yeah, that's a good
would there
question.
be?
Yeah, so that's something that we definitely want to focus on in the programming as we work with residents in their recovery and healing journeys. So really trying to equip them with those tools to prevent re-exploitation, because we know that unfortunately it can happen to survivors after coming out of a program. If they fall back into that same situation, we really want to make sure that they have the resources that they need, that they know how to appropriately use technology, how to protect themselves from any exploitative people, really just setting them up with those resources and giving them that education that they may not have had before. So we'll have daytime programming and a lot of life skills classes as part of our program model. So we anticipate that in between like counseling and group therapy and discussions with other survivor leaders as well. That'll be a big piece of it as well, just to kind of really reinforce that and give them those tools to prevent that re-exploitation, because that is something that would be a concern. So that's something that we're hoping to incorporate into our program model as well.
Thank you.
All right. Okay, I see Pam. Yeah, we have a question. Do you have a wish list for donations?
Yeah, so right now, the safe house, we're almost finished furnishing it. We have a few more needs, such as like curtains and blinds, if that's what you're referring to for like physical item donations. We do have a list of things that we're going to be going to the safe house to take like an inventory in the next week or two to really hone in on the little things that we might need, such as like vacuum cleaners or things like that. So we'll have a better idea probably within a week or so. We have all of like the big stuff, which is awesome, mostly taken care of, but we now just have to go through and take an inventory of the little things that we might need. And if you're interested, I can definitely send that list your way.
Yeah, if you send that, then we can post that and share that information with our members and anyone who's here who wants it.
Okay, great. Yeah, I can definitely do that.
Well, thank you. I think if we have anybody comes up with a question in the next few minutes, don't hesitate. In the meantime, I will say that I will apologize ahead of time, Eleanor. I was so relaxed here that I forgot to start. I didn't start recording until you were probably a minute into your talk. So for next time, I'm going to have a post-it on the front of my screen that says turn on the recording. So when I post it, I'll put a little note that so people know we're missing just that, probably your first line about how it was the 63rd annual. But we will make it available. And then just, I hope that those of you who are here will encourage others to join us over the next 4 weeks. I assume that you all have the schedule, but I'm going to run through it really quickly. Next week, Rebecca Josephson will be joining us, and she will be ordained on the 27th at South Congregational Church as a UCC pastor, and she's already started serving the Canterbury Community Church. So she'll be talking about her faith journey. And then the following week on March 24th, we have two women from Christ the King Parish who are going to talk about the Stephen Ministry, which is a one-on-one Christ-centered care provided by trained and supervised lay leaders, people with experiencing life difficulties. On March 31st, Pam Friedman, Rabbi Pam, who is here and might want to speak for herself, but she and Rick Eames will be presenting about URI. And I am realizing that, let's see.
Let me just say that URI is United Religions Initiative, and the greater Concord Interfaith Council is already part of URI, and we're inviting guests from other interfaith groups in New Hampshire. And those of you for whom I have an email, I'm going to actually be writing you after this luncheon to see if you might have connections with some of the communities we're having trouble reaching.
Okay. All right. And then on the April 7th, which is our last one, Adam Smedberg, who is a community engagement specialist from Church World Service, will be speaking. He's been our connection for Crop Walk, which is something that we've done at the Interfaith Council for 35 or 36 years now. And I had initially asked him to talk about Church World Service's work with Afghan refugees, and particularly how Church World Service works with local partners, like the one in New Hampshire. Of course, in the meantime, we have the war in Ukraine, and I think that Adam may also be talking a little bit about Church World Service's work with the Ukrainian situation as well. But so we have some really interesting speakers coming up, and we hope that people will come and enjoy them. And Eleanor, I know Margaret's left. Eleanor, is there anything else you want to add right now?
I can't think of anything. I just had one more question, perhaps for Hannah. You mentioned that you were going to be serving, or you're targeting adult women over age 18. Is there a sense, or do you know what kind of trafficking is the most predominant form in this area?
I think there's definitely a mix in New Hampshire, but both labor trafficking and sex trafficking is pretty common in New Hampshire. I don't know the exact numbers, but in the human trafficking committee meetings, a lot of times law enforcement will give some insight. And it seems as if like the forced prostitution is pretty common, but both labor trafficking and sex trafficking happens here in New Hampshire.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Right under our noses. It's amazing.
Yeah, I think a lot of what we do is just trying to expand our outreach and inform the community that it's happening here, because in such a small state, so tight knit like New Hampshire, it's relatively safe. So you don't think that things like this happen here, but unfortunately the reality is that it does. So
Well, thank you.
You're welcome.
All right. Well, I think that what we talked about when we were with the committee was that one of the things, the Lenten luncheons used to be, they were a fellowship time, a time for people to socialize as well as to eat and to hear a speaker, and that we would allow, so officially we go till 1, and we have about 10 minutes, so we're happy to leave the meeting open for people to just, some of you know each other, some of you don't, for people to have a little conversation. And if no one wants to do that, then we will end that. But I'm going to just kind of leave it for a few minutes. And if you, have anything else or anything else you want to share that you think other people might be interested in, that
I'd just like to welcome Jill, Reverend Jill Small, and invite you to our next council meeting. We meet the 4th Tuesday evening of the month, and we would certainly enjoy having you join us.
4th Tuesday on Zoom.
Yes,
we're still,
you're
for now,
still
it's on
meeting on Zoom. Yes.
So
And
some,
I'm sorry, Reverend Jill, I was just going to say, with your permission, because you sent me your email address, I
Yes.
will connect you and then we can add you to the list.
okay, that's great, because I was going to say, how would I find the Zoom link, or is there a website I should go to or something like that? So,
We'll get it all to you.
I do have a question. This might be relevant. Has there been participation from this congregation before? I don't know. Gordon
Yes.
Crouch was here for like 23 years, I think. So he was here a long time.
I forget what.
Yeah,
do
was
we-
it Maxine? Max, we do
Maxine
have reps.
Petrocelli?
Maxine is one of your reps and she attends meetings
Yes.
regularly.
Yes.
And
Okay.
there's, I've forgotten right now, but there's 2 people, I think. Who's the other person from? I've forgotten right now, but yes, Gordon was involved sporadically, I think. He was really busy with a lot of other, but and Hopkinton hosted one of our last in-person meetings. I remember, which
Yes.
feels like a long time ago now.
Okay.
So yes, you know, your congregation has a strong connection
Okay, great,
to the Interfaith Council.
great.
So
I wanted to welcome Jill too, only because we're her neighbors in Dunbarton. We
Oh.
members of the Dunbarton Congregational Church, and Phil and Eleanor also are in Dunbarton. So welcome to you, our new neighbor.
Nice. Well, if you're interested, I can tell you a little snippet. This is my 7th interim placement. I did about 25 years of settled ministry before that. And all the churches I've served as interims have called somebody, so I have a great batting average. And I'm looking forward to getting to know all of you a little bit better as well in the year and a half or so that I expect to be here.
Okay, good. And Pam, are you living in the Concord area?
I'm actually living in New Hampshire, and I'm serving as a hospice chaplain after having served as an interim rabbi in some congregations before. So
Okay. All right, well, good. Well, welcome.
thank you. And we have wonderful interfaith councils in my area, but we don't have any that belong to URI. So my buddies in URI at the international level kind of, you know, plucked me like a bird and introduced me to Rick and said, you know, connect with GCIC.
Yeah, good.
all right. Well, I see, let's see, I think we've heard from most people. I just want to acknowledge that Debbie, who hasn't spoken, who's kind of quiet, but who is a representative to council from Bow Mills Methodist Church.
Yeah. We'll be hosting this month.
Yeah, so we're
Yeah.
glad to have you.
Thank you.
Bow Mill has been one of the churches that welcomed our luncheons and
Yes,
you know,
yes.
fellowship there. So
Uh-huh.
we look forward to doing that again.
Yeah, so are we.
Oh,
Yeah.
good.
Yeah.
And Debbie, we're also glad that your church is the church rules service pickup place. So that when we get
Yes.
together, we don't have to go very far to bring them to you.
No, it's right there behind in the parking lot. Yeah.
Good.
Okay, well, it looks like our group has dwindled down, and I'm gonna stop the recording part. That I'm not gonna close the meeting, but I will go ahead and stop the recording.